I was sitting on a hard plastic chair outside the hospital room when I heard my father laugh. It wasn't a small laugh. It wasn't nervous. It was loud, proud, and careless. The kind of laugh that cuts straight through your chest. "Don't worry," he said, waving his hand like nothing mattered. "My younger daughter will carry our family name." I froze. My hands were shaking, but I held them together so no one would notice. The doctor hadn't even spoken yet, and my father had already decided who mattered. I stared at the white wall in front of me. It smelled like disinfectant and fear. Hospitals always smell like fear. My name is Sarah. I am the older daughter, the one who was always told to be strong, but never important. Growing up, I learned early how to disappear without leaving the room. At dinner, Dad talked to my sister Emily at school events. He clapped for her when I achieved something. He nodded and said, "That's good. For a girl." I told myself it didn't hurt, but it did. Every single time. That day in the hospital. My father sat there with his arms crossed, acting like he owned the future. Emily stood beside him, quiet as always. Her eyes were on the floor. And me. I was invisible again. The doctor finally stepped forward. He cleared his throat. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Mr. Richard," he said softly, "there's something we need to discuss." My father was still smiling. I remember thinking, please, stop talking, because I felt something heavy in the air, something that was about to break. The doctor looked at Emily, then at me, then back at my father. And that's when my father's smile slowly faded. "You see, my whole life I was told I wasn't enough, not soft enough, not quiet enough, not quiet enough, not the right kind of daughter." I carried the weight of that into adulthood. I worked harder than I should have. I stayed silent when I wanted to scream. All I ever wanted was for my father to look at me and say, "I see you." But instead, I got laughter. As the doctor opened his mouth to speak again, my heart started racing. I didn't know what he was about to say. I only knew that whatever came next would change everything. That moment, that single breath before the truth, was the moment I realized something. Sometimes people don't hurt you with cruelty. They hurt you with confidence, with certainty, with the belief that you will always stay small. But I didn't know yet that the truth was about to speak. Softly. And when it did, my father would never laugh the same way again. After that moment in the hospital hallway, my mind drifted backward. Not to one memory, but too many. Because my father's laughter didn't start that day. It had followed me my whole life. My father, Richard, believed in one thing more than anything else: legacy. He talked about it like it was air. Like without it, a man was nothing. And in his world, legacy had a shape. It looked like obedience. It sounded like silence. And somehow, it never looked like me. When my sister Emily was born, Dad finally smiled the way I had waited years to see. She was calm, gentle, always careful with her words. He used to stroke her hair and say, "This one understands family." I was 10 years old when I first realized I didn't belong. I had brought home a certificate from school, top of my class. I placed it on the table in front of him, my hands shaking with hope. He glanced at it for 2 seconds and said, "That's nice, Sarah, but grades won't make you a leader." Then he turned to Emily and asked if she wanted ice cream. That night, I cried quietly into my pillow so no one would hear. I learned early that tears made things worse. As we grew older, the gap between us grew too. Emily stayed close to home. I worked part-time jobs, studied late, dreamed big. Dad often said things like, "A woman shouldn't argue so much. A family needs peace, not opinions." And every time, I felt like I was being erased one sentence at a time. The worst part wasn't the words. It was the silence that followed them. Emily never defended me. She never disagreed with him. She just stayed quiet and benefited from it. I don't blame her completely. Silence was safer. But that safety came at a cost. Mine, years later. When Dad's health started failing, he called Emily first. Not me. Never me. I helped pay bills. I drove them to appointments. Still, I remained the backup. The extra? The strong one who didn't need acknowledgement. That's why his words in the hospital hurt so deeply. Because they weren't new. Emily will carry our family name. It was the final confirmation of what I always feared, that no matter what I did, I would never be chosen. As I sat there listening to the doctor speak carefully, I realized something painful. Emily knew things I didn't. She had been included in conversations I was never part of. And in that moment, I felt the first crack of betrayal. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet understanding that the people closest to me had made decisions about my life. Without me, I didn't know yet how deep that betrayal went. I only knew one thing. The truth that was about to come out didn't just belong to my father. It belonged to all of us. And once it was spoken, there would be no going back. The doctor closed the door behind us gently, like he already knew this conversation was fragile. The room suddenly felt smaller. Too quiet, my father sat on the edge of the hospital bed, his hands resting on his knees. He looked tired but still proud, still sure of himself. Emily stood near the window, her arms wrapped around her body. I stood last. Always last. The doctor glanced at a file, then looked up again. His eyes didn't carry judgment. "Only care, Mr. Richard?" he said softly. "Before we continue, I need to clarify something about your family medical history." My father nodded, confident. "Of course. My younger daughter is healthy. Strong genes." Emily flinched. Just slightly, but I saw it. The doctor paused. That pause felt longer than it should have, sir. It's continued, lowering his voice. "Your daughter Emily has a condition that affects fertility." The words hung in the air. They didn't rush. They didn't soften themselves. My father blinked. Once, twice. "That's not possible," he said quickly. "She would have told me." Emily's face turned pale. Her lips trembled. I felt my heart start pounding, not from shock, but from understanding. Suddenly, so many silences made sense. The doctor spoke again, slower now. "She is known for years. It does not affect her health, but biologically. She cannot have children." My father laughed. Just once. A sharp, empty sound. "This isn't funny," he said. "Why are you joking about this?" "I'm not joking," the doctor replied gently. Emily finally spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Dad, please." That was all she said, and in that moment, something inside me broke. Not because Emily couldn't have children, but because she had known. And she had stayed silent while I was treated like I didn't matter. My father's face changed. The pride drained out of it, replaced by confusion. Then, anger. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded. Emily started crying. "I was scared," she said. "I didn't want you to see me differently." Wanted to scream. "You already let him see me differently." But I stayed quiet. Because suddenly the spotlight was shifting, and I wasn't sure if I wanted it. The doctor cleared his throat again. "There is more," he said carefully. My father looked at him sharply. "What now?" The doctor turned slightly toward me, and for the first time that day, someone looked at me directly. "Your older daughter," he said, "has no such condition." My father slowly turned his head toward me. His eyes searched my face like he was trying to recognize a stranger. I felt exposed, raw, seen in a way I never had been before. In that silence, I realized something terrifying. The value he placed on us was never about love. It was about usefulness, and now that the rules had changed, I didn't know who I was to him anymore. But I knew one thing. This wasn't the end of the truth. It was only the beginning. The room stayed quiet after the doctor's words. Too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until you can hear your own heartbeat. My father didn't say my name. He didn't apologize. He just stared at me like I was a math problem he had never planned to solve. Emily was crying now, covering her face with her hands. I watched her shoulders shake, and for a moment, I almost reached out. Almost, but then I remembered every dinner where she stayed quiet. Every time Dad praised her while I stood invisible beside them. Every moment she let him believe I was less. Knowing the truth, I felt something change inside me, not anger, not hatred. Clarity. I finally understood that begging for love had cost me my voice, and I was done paying that price. The doctor excused himself, saying he would give us time. When the door closed, Dad finally spoke. "So," he said slowly, "you're healthy." That was it. No concern, no warmth, just a calculation. I nodded once. "Yes." He looked away, rubbing his hands together. "I didn't know," he muttered, more to himself than to me. I wanted to tell him everything. How hard I worked. How much I sacrificed. How many nights I cried alone. But I stopped myself, because I realized something important in that moment. If I poured my heart out now, it would still be on his terms. So instead, I stayed calm. That calm scared even me. Emily looked up at me through tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant to hurt you." I believed her. But believing didn't erase the damage. "I know," I said quietly. And I meant it. That was when my plan began. Not a loud plan. Not a cruel one, a smart one. I decided I would no longer explain myself. I would no longer fight for a seat at a table that was never built for me. If my father only understood worth through results, then I would let my life speak. I took a slow breath and said, "There's something you should know." Both of them looked at me. For the first time in my life, they were listening. "I've built my own family," I continued. "I didn't tell you because you never asked about my life, only about my usefulness." My father's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" I met his eyes. Not with anger. With honesty. "I'm married," I said, "and I'm pregnant." The words felt heavy and freeing at the same time. Emily gasped softly. My father froze. "You what?" he asked. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. "I didn't plan this to hurt anyone," I said, "but I won't hide anymore either." That was my revenge. Not humiliation. Not shouting. Truth. And as I stood there calm and steady, I saw it clearly. The strongest thing I ever did was stop asking to be chosen. My words didn't echo. They didn't explode. They landed heavy. Final, "I'm pregnant." The room felt like it stopped breathing. My father stared at me as if I had spoken a language he didn't understand. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. For once, he had no words ready. Emily was the first to react. She took a small step toward me, her eyes wide. You're serious?" she asked. I nodded. Yes, I placed a hand on my stomach without thinking. The gesture was natural, protective. It surprised even me. My father stood up too quickly. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Why didn't you tell us?" he demanded, his voice sharp, almost accusing. I felt that familiar sting. The instinct to apologize. To explain, but I didn't. Instead, I answered calmly. "Because every time I tried to talk about my life, you changed the subject. Because you never asked who I loved or what I wanted. You only talked about names, blood, legacy." He shook his head, pacing the room. "This is unbelievable," he muttered. "All this time." "Yes," I said softly. "All this time." Emily's face crumpled. "I didn't know," she whispered. "You never said anything." I looked at her, really looked at her. I didn't think anyone wanted to hear it. Silence fell again. But this time it felt different. It wasn't crushing. It was revealing. My father finally stopped pacing. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. Or maybe seeing me for the first time. "So," he said slowly, "the family name." I felt something tighten in my chest. There it was. The same old question. I took a deep breath. "The family name doesn't need saving," I said. "People do," he flinched. That was when I knew the balance had shifted. Not because I had something he wanted, but because I had stopped needing anything from him. The doctor knocked and came back in, breaking the tension. He explained the next steps for my father's treatment. speaking calmly, professionally. I listened. But my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about the girl I used to be, the one who waited for approval, the one who measured her worth by silence. She wasn't standing there anymore. When the doctor left again, my father spoke quietly, almost too quietly. "I made mistakes," he said, not looking at me, not at Emily, just at the floor. The words weren't perfect. They weren't full, but they were real. I nodded once. "I know." That was all I said, because forgiveness doesn't always mean rebuilding. Sometimes it just means releasing. As I walked out of that hospital room, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I won, but because I chose myself, and that was something no one could ever take from me. Life didn't change overnight after that hospital day. Real life never does. My father recovered slowly. His body healed faster than his pride. We spoke, but carefully. Like two people learning a new language neither of us had been taught. He called me more after that. Not often, not warmly, but it was different. Sometimes he asked about the baby. Sometimes he just sat in silence on the phone, and for the first time, I didn't rush to fill that silence. Emily and I talked too. Long talks. Painful ones. She admitted she had lived her whole life trying not to disappoint him. That she thought if she stayed quiet, she would be safe. I told her something I had never said out loud before. I wasn't loud because I was brave, I said. I was loud because I was lonely. We cried that day. Not because everything was fixed, but because we finally stopped pretending. As my pregnancy grew, so did something else inside me. Strength. Not the kind that survives pain. The kind that refuses it. I stopped waiting for my father to change. I stopped hoping for words he might never say. And strangely, that's when he started trying. One afternoon, months later, he said something small. Something simple: "I should have listened to you more." He didn't say, "I'm proud." But I didn't need him to anymore, because I had already said it to myself. When my child was born, I held that tiny life in my arms and felt something powerful. Not ownership. Not legacy. Freedom. I realized then that family names don't survive through control. They survive through care. And silence doesn't protect anyone. It only teaches others how to ignore you. If there's one thing this story taught me, it's this. You don't have to prove your worth to people who only value you when it benefits them. You don't need revenge that burns everything down. Sometimes the strongest revenge is building a life so full that their approval no longer fits inside it. To anyone listening who has felt invisible in their own family, to anyone who has been laughed at instead of understood, your voice matters, even if it shakes, even if it comes late. And if this story stayed with you, if it made you feel seen or understood, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your story deserves to be heard too.